In a world where every royal breath is monitored, every glance analyzed, and every public appearance dissected by millions, sometimes the most beautiful surprises come when least expected. What happens when a moment of pure joy breaks through the carefully orchestrated facade of royal duty? When genuine emotion overwhelms protocol, and a secret too precious to hide finally finds its way into the light. This is the story of Princess Isabella Montclair, whose radiant announcement at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala would send shockwaves of joy through the kingdom and remind everyone why they fell in love with their people's princess in the first place. Princess Isabella Montclair stood before her ornate bedroom mirror in Rosewood Palace. Her reflection, showing the same composed face the world had come to adore over the past 8 years. At 28, she had mastered the art of royal composure. But today, her emerald eyes held a secret that threatened to spill over with every breath she took. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of her private chambers, casting golden rays across the Persian rugs that had witnessed generations of royal secrets. Isabella's lady-in-waiting, Margaret, bustled about preparing the day's schedule, oblivious to the internal storm brewing within her mistress. "Your Highness, the car will be ready in 30 minutes for the hospital visit," Margaret announced, her crisp British accent cutting through Isabella's thoughts. "The press will be expecting you at precisely 10 o'clock. Isabella nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat abdomen. 6 weeks. 6 weeks since Dr. Matthews had delivered the news that would change everything. 6 weeks of carrying this incredible secret, sharing it only with her husband, Prince Alexander, who was currently away on a diplomatic mission to Southeast Asia. The weight of the secret had been both exhilarating and exhausting. Every public appearance required careful consideration of her wardrobe, her posture, her expressions. The media scrutinized her every move, and, recently, she had noticed the speculative headlines growing bolder. "Is Princess Isabella expecting? Royal baby watch begins." The telltale signs we've all missed. But they hadn't missed anything because there had been nothing to miss. Isabella had become a master of deflection, of strategic scarf placement, of choosing flowing fabrics over fitted ones. She had declined wine at state dinners with such grace that no one questioned her sudden preference for sparkling water. When morning sickness struck, she had attributed her occasional absences to minor headaches or schedule adjustments. The irony wasn't lost on her that today's event was at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, a place where new life was celebrated daily. She had been patron of the hospital for 5 years, ever since her marriage to Alexander had thrust her into the spotlight as the people's princess. The children there had always held a special place in her heart, and now, carrying her own child, that connection felt even more profound. As Margaret helped her into a navy blue dress with delicate pearl buttons, Isabella's mind wandered to Alexander. He was in Singapore, attending a climate summit, and wouldn't return for another 3 days. They had discussed when and how to announce their news to the world. They had planned a formal announcement through the palace press office, carefully timed and orchestrated like everything else in their lives. But, lately, Isabella had been feeling the weight of the pretense. She was tired of hiding, tired of deflecting questions, tired of being anything less than authentic with the people who had embraced her so warmly. The children at the hospital, in particular, had always brought out her most genuine self. They didn't care about protocol or proper procedure. They just wanted to laugh and play and feel loved. "Your Highness, are you feeling well?" Margaret's concerned voice broke through her reverie. "You look a bit pale." Isabella managed to smile. "Just a bit tired, Margaret. Nothing that a visit with the children won't cure." Margaret nodded, though her expression remained slightly worried. She had served the royal family for 20 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something was different. But she was also fiercely loyal and would never pry into matters that weren't her business. The drive to St. Margaret's was uneventful, though Isabella noticed the usual crowd of photographers seemed larger than normal. Word had somehow gotten out that this visit would be special, though she couldn't imagine how. The hospital had planned a small ceremony to unveil a new pediatric wing that had been funded by Isabella's charity foundation, and several families whose children had been helped by the hospital would be in attendance. As the royal car pulled up to the hospital's main entrance, Isabella could see the crowd of well-wishers pressed against the barriers. Children held handmade signs with messages like, "We love you, Princess Isabella," and "Thank you for caring about us." The sight never failed to move her, but today it felt especially poignant. Dr. Sarah Harrison, the hospital's chief pediatric surgeon, greeted Isabella at the entrance with a warm smile. They had worked together on numerous occasions, and Isabella had come to deeply respect the woman's dedication to healing children. "Your Highness, we're so honored to have you here today," Dr. Harrison said as they walked through the hospital corridors. "The new wing is going to make such a difference for our young patients." As they toured the new facilities, Isabella felt her energy returning. The state-of-the-art equipment, the colorful murals painted by local artists, the comfortable family rooms where parents could stay close to their children. It all represented hope and healing and the kind of work that made her royal duties feel meaningful. They visited several young patients, and Isabella spent time reading stories, playing games, and simply listening to their tales of bravery. One little girl named Sophie, who was recovering from heart surgery, presented Isabella with a drawing of a princess holding a baby. "This is you, Princess Isabella," Sophie said with the innocent directness that only children possess. "Mama says you'll have a baby princess someday, and she'll be lucky to have you as her mama." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The drawing was beautiful and naive and somehow perfectly prophetic. She knelt down to Sophie's level, fighting back tears that threatened to spill over. "Thank you, Sophie," she managed to say. "This is the most beautiful drawing I've ever received." As they continued through the hospital, Isabella found herself growing more and more emotional. Every child they met, every parent they comforted, every doctor and nurse they thanked, it all felt connected to the new life growing inside her. She began to understand that this wasn't just about her and Alexander anymore. This baby would belong, in some way, to all of these people who had shown her such love and support. The formal ceremony was held in the hospital's main atrium, which had been transformed into an elegant space with flowers and bunting. About 200 people were in attendance: hospital staff, board members, major donors, and several families with children who had been patients. Local news crews had been invited to cover the unveiling of the new wing. As Isabella prepared to give her speech, she felt a familiar flutter in her stomach. For a moment, she thought it might be nerves, but then she realized it was something else entirely. It was too early for the baby to be moving, but somehow she felt a connection, a sense that this moment was bigger than any of them had planned. She looked out at the crowd, seeing faces full of hope and gratitude and love. These people had welcomed her into their community, had supported her work, had made her feel like more than just a figurehead. They deserved her honesty, her authenticity, her truth. Alexander's voice echoed in her mind from their last phone conversation. "Whatever feels right in the moment, my love. I trust your instincts completely." Isabella took a deep breath, her hand once again moving instinctively to her abdomen. She thought about Sophie's drawing, about all the children who had touched her heart, about the new life that would soon join this incredible community of love and support. The moment had arrived, and Princess Isabella knew that everything was about to change. The hospital atrium buzzed with anticipation as Princess Isabella stepped up to the podium, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, creating an almost ethereal glow around her figure. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically, their lenses focused on capturing every moment of what was supposed to be a routine royal engagement. Dr. Harrison introduced Isabella with warmth and genuine admiration, highlighting the princess's 5 years of dedicated service to the hospital and her instrumental role in raising funds for the new pediatric wing. As the applause died down, Isabella looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, all united in their connection to this place of healing. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison, and thank you all for being here today," Isabella began, her voice clear and steady despite the butterflies performing acrobatics in her stomach. "When I first became patron of St. Margaret's Children's Hospital 5 years ago, I thought I understood what this role would mean. I thought it would be about fundraising, about ribbon cuttings, about lending my name to a worthy cause." She paused, scanning the crowd, her eyes landing on several of the children she had met earlier. Sophie sat in the front row with her parents, still clutching the drawing she had made. "I was wrong," Isabella continued, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "This hospital, these children, their families, and the incredible staff who work here have taught me that it's about so much more than that. It's about hope. It's about the miracle of healing. It's about the profound strength of the human spirit, especially when that spirit happens to inhabit a small body facing big challenges." The crowd was hanging on her every word, but Isabella noticed something else happening. In the back of the room, she could see members of the press leaning forward, sensing that something about this speech was different. There was an electricity in the air, an intimacy to her words that went beyond the usual royal remarks. Margaret stood near the wall, watching her mistress with growing concern. She had attended hundreds of Isabella's public appearances, and there was something in the princess's demeanor today that felt unscripted, unrehearsed, and beautifully dangerous. Over the past 5 years, I've held the hands of frightened children before surgery, Isabella said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I've celebrated with families when good news came, and I've grieved with them when the news wasn't what we hoped for. I've watched miracles happen in these halls, and I've witnessed the kind of love that transcends every challenge life can throw at us. As she spoke, Isabella's hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, a gesture so brief and natural that most people didn't notice it. But the cameras caught it, and in newsrooms across the country, editors would later study that moment frame by frame. The new wing we're dedicating today represents more than just expanded facilities, she continued. It represents our commitment to the future, our belief that every child deserves the best possible chance at a healthy, happy life. It represents our faith that tomorrow will be brighter than today. Isabella paused again, and, in that silence, she felt something shift inside her. Not physically, but emotionally. The weight of the secret she had been carrying suddenly felt less like a burden and more like a gift she was ready to share. I've been thinking a lot lately about the future, she said, her voice softer now, more personal. About the kind of world we're creating for the next generation. About the legacy we want to leave for the children who will come after us. In the audience, Dr. Harrison exchanged a glance with the hospital's board chairman. Something was happening here, something that wasn't in the script they had been provided. But, instead of concern, they felt excitement. This was the Princess Isabella they knew and loved, authentic, passionate, and completely present in the moment. This hospital has been a place of profound learning for me, Isabella said, her eyes now glistening with unshed tears. It has taught me about resilience, about hope, about the incredible strength that emerges when a community comes together to support its most vulnerable members. And it has shown me that the most beautiful moments in life are often the ones we don't plan for. The crowd was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something special. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that this was a moment to listen, to be present, to absorb whatever wisdom their beloved princess was about to share. Isabella looked down at the podium, gathering her thoughts and her courage. When she looked back up, her smile was radiant, transformative, and completely unguarded. Today, as we celebrate this new wing and look toward the future, I find myself filled with a joy that I can barely contain, she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. Because I know that very soon, this hospital will have an even deeper meaning for me personally. The silence in the room was so complete that the whir of camera motors seemed loud in comparison. Hearts began to beat faster, breaths were held, and everyone present sensed that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Margaret felt her own heart skip a beat as she watched her mistress, suddenly, understanding what was about to happen. She reached for her phone to call the palace, then stopped herself. This wasn't her decision to make, and, besides, it was too late to stop what was already in motion. Isabella's personal protection officer, James Morrison, stood a few feet away, his trained eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of disturbance. But what he saw instead was a room full of people leaning forward in collective anticipation, their faces reflecting love, excitement, and genuine care for the woman standing before them. Some of you may have noticed that I've been a bit tired lately, Isabella said with a laugh that sounded like music. Some of you may have wondered why I've been choosing slightly different styles, or why I've suddenly developed such an appreciation for ginger tea. A few people in the crowd began to smile, beginning to understand where this was heading. Sophie's mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Harrison's eyes widened with delighted surprise. The truth is, Isabella continued, her voice now strong and clear and filled with joy. Prince Alexander and I have been keeping a wonderful secret. And while we had planned to share this news in a more traditional way, being here with all of you today, surrounded by so much love and hope and possibility, I realize there's no place I'd rather be when I tell you that. She paused, her hand moving openly to her abdomen now, her smile so bright it seemed to illuminate the entire room. We're expecting our first child. For a moment, the silence continued, as if the words needed time to travel from Isabella's lips to the hearts of everyone present. And then, like a dam bursting, the room erupted in applause, cheers, and tears of joy. Sophie jumped up from her seat, her drawing clutched in her hand, pointing at Isabella and exclaiming to anyone who would listen, "I drew her with a baby. I drew her with a baby." Her parents laughed through their tears, hugging their daughter and each other as they processed the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Dr. Harrison wiped tears from her eyes, thinking about all the children who would grow up knowing that their princess understood the miracle of new life, not just professionally, but personally. The hospital staff erupted in celebration, some of them crying, others cheering, all of them feeling honored to have been part of this incredible moment. The camera crews worked frantically to capture every reaction, every emotion, every detail of what was already being recognized as one of the most memorable royal moments in recent history. This wasn't a carefully planned press release or a formal palace announcement. This was real, raw, and absolutely beautiful. Margaret finally remembered to breathe, though she was already calculating in her head how many phone calls she would need to make in the next hour. The palace staff would need to be informed, security protocols would need to be adjusted, and the press office would need to prepare for the media frenzy that was about to ensue. But, for now, in this moment, all of that seemed secondary to the pure joy filling the room. Isabella had made her choice, and it had been perfect. As the applause continued, Isabella laughed with delight, her formal royal composure completely abandoned in favor of genuine human emotion. She had crossed a line from which there was no return, and she had never felt more free or more authentically herself. The storm was about to break, but it would be a storm of celebration, of love, and of anticipation for the future that Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander were about to create together. The thunderous applause seemed to go on forever, washing over Princess Isabella like a warm embrace. She stood at the podium, her hands pressed together near her heart, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and excitement from everyone in the room. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she looked out at the sea of smiling faces, each one reflecting her own happiness back to her. Sophie had somehow managed to make her way to the front of the crowd, her small hand reaching up toward the stage. Isabella immediately stepped down from the podium, her security detail tensing slightly, but allowing the spontaneous moment to unfold. She knelt down to meet the little girl at eye level, and Sophie pressed her drawing into Isabella's hands. "You see, Princess? I knew you would have a baby," Sophie said with the triumphant satisfaction of a child who had been proven right. "Will you name her Sophie?" Isabella laughed, a sound so pure and joyful that it sparked another round of applause from the crowd. "We don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet, sweetheart," she said, tucking a strand of Sophie's hair behind her ear. "But if it is a little girl, Sophie would be a beautiful name to consider." Dr. Harrison approached with tears in her eyes, extending her hand to congratulate Isabella. "Your Highness, this is the most wonderful news. This hospital has always been special to you, but now it will hold an even more precious place in your heart." "Dr. Harrison," Isabella said, rising to embrace the doctor warmly, "I can't think of anywhere I'd rather have shared this news. These children, these families, this community of healers, they've all taught me so much about love and hope. I wanted them to be among the first to know." As word spread through the crowd, Isabella found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Parents whose children had been treated at the hospital came forward to share their congratulations and their own stories of pregnancy and parenthood. Hospital staff members offered their professional expertise and personal support. Board members and donors expressed their excitement about the royal family's expansion and what it would mean for the hospital's future. James Morrison, Isabella's protection officer, was simultaneously thrilled for his principal and concerned about the logistics of the situation. His earpiece crackled with urgent messages from the palace security team, who had just learned about the announcement through the live news coverage. Within minutes, the area around the hospital would be flooded with additional media, curious onlookers, and well-wishers hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess who had just made history. "Ma'am," James said quietly, approaching Isabella during a brief lull in the congratulations, "I've received word that the palace is preparing a statement to confirm the announcement. We should probably consider returning soon to avoid the crowds that are already gathering outside." Isabella nodded, understanding the practical concerns even as she felt reluctant to leave this perfect bubble of celebration. "Of course, James. But could we take a few more minutes?" I'd like to visit with the children in the wards who couldn't make it to the ceremony. They should hear the news from me, not from television. Margaret had finally managed to reach the palace chief of staff, Sir Edmund Hartwell, whose initial shock had quickly given way to professional crisis management mode. While he privately admired Isabella's authenticity and the genuine emotion of the moment, he was already dealing with a flood of media requests and preparing for the global attention that would soon focus on the royal family. "Tell Her Highness that we're handling everything from this end," Sir Edmund told Margaret over the phone. "His Royal Highness Prince Alexander has been contacted in Singapore and is over the moon with excitement. He's making arrangements to return home as soon as possible." Meanwhile, in the pediatric wards, news of Isabella's announcement was spreading like wildfire. Nurses and doctors who had been watching the ceremony on the ward televisions were sharing the news with their young patients, many of whom had met the princess during her previous visits. When Isabella arrived on the pediatric oncology ward, she was greeted by a group of children who had organized an impromptu celebration. 8-year-old Marcus, who was undergoing treatment for leukemia, had convinced the ward staff to help him make a banner that read, "Congratulations, Princess Isabella and baby. We wanted to make something special for you," Marcus explained as Isabella admired their handiwork. "Nurse Jenny told us that having a baby is like getting the best present ever, except you have to wait 9 months to unwrap it." Isabella burst into laughter at the child's logic. "That's exactly right, Marcus. And do you know what makes it even more special? Having friends like all of you to share the excitement with." She spent the next hour moving from room to room, sharing her news personally with each child who was able to receive visitors. Some were too ill for extended conversations, but even brief moments of connection felt precious and meaningful. In the neonatal intensive care unit, she spoke with new parents who were anxiously waiting for their premature babies to grow strong enough to go home. "Your presence here gives us so much hope," one young mother told Isabella as they stood beside her daughter's incubator. "Knowing that you understand what it's like to worry about a child, to hope for their health and happiness, it makes us feel less alone." Isabella squeezed the woman's hand gently. "You're not alone. This whole community is here to support you. And now I understand that support in a completely new way." As the afternoon wore on, Isabella became aware of the growing commotion outside the hospital. Through the windows, she could see news vans arriving, crowds gathering behind police barriers, and the organized chaos that always accompanied major royal news. The outside world was awakening to what had happened in this small hospital atrium, and soon the story would be broadcast around the globe. But inside the hospital walls, a different kind of magic was happening. Children who had been facing their own health challenges were suddenly filled with excitement about new life and new possibilities. Families who had been stressed and worried found themselves smiling and celebrating. Hospital staff who dealt with serious medical issues every day were reminded of the joy that comes with healthy pregnancies and happy outcomes. Dr. Harrison found Isabella in the children's library, where she was reading a story about a brave little mouse to a group of young patients. The scene was so natural and beautiful that the doctor almost hated to interrupt. "Your Highness," she said softly, "I hate to break up this wonderful afternoon, but I think Mr. Morrison is right about the situation outside. The crowds are getting quite large, and we want to make sure everyone stays safe." Isabella looked around at the children who had gathered to hear the story, their faces bright with interest and affection. She had been so caught up in the joy of sharing her news and connecting with these special young people that she had almost forgotten about the world beyond these walls. "You're absolutely right," she said, closing the book gently. "But before I go, I want to make a promise to all of you." The children leaned in closer, eager to hear what their princess had to say. "I promise that this baby, when he or she arrives, will know all about this place and all about the brave, wonderful children who live and heal here. I promise that my child will grow up understanding how lucky we are to be part of a community that takes care of its most vulnerable members. And I promise that I will bring my baby here to visit with all of you just as soon as it's safe to do so." The children erupted in cheers and began making plans for the royal baby's first visit. They discussed which toys they would share, which books they would recommend, and which games they would teach the new prince or princess. As Isabella prepared to leave, Sophie appeared one more time, having convinced her parents to let her say goodbye. She had created another drawing during Isabella's ward visits, this one showing the princess surrounded by all the children from the hospital, with a small baby cradled in her arms. "This is for when the baby comes," Sophie explained, presenting her latest masterpiece. "So you remember that we were all here when you told everyone the happy news." Isabella knelt down to accept the drawing, feeling her emotions overwhelm her once again. "Sophie, this is perfect. I will treasure this forever. And when my baby is old enough, I'll tell them all about the day a very special little girl drew pictures that made their mama's heart so full of love." As Isabella finally made her way toward the hospital's rear exit, where her car was waiting to avoid the crowds at the main entrance, she reflected on the afternoon's events. What had started as a routine royal engagement had become one of the most meaningful experiences of her life. She had shared her most precious news with people who truly understood the miracle of new life, and their response had been everything she could have hoped for and more. Margaret walked beside her, still somewhat shell-shocked by the day's events, but undeniably proud of her mistress's courage and authenticity. "Ma'am, if I may say so, that was absolutely beautiful. His Royal Highness is going to be so sorry he missed it." Isabella smiled, her hand resting protectively on her abdomen. "He'll understand why I couldn't wait." This felt like the perfect moment, the perfect place, the perfect people to share it with. Sometimes the best things in life can't be planned or scripted. As they reached the car, Isabella could hear the distant sounds of celebration from the crowd gathered at the hospital's main entrance. The news was spreading beyond the hospital now, rippling out into the world and touching lives across the kingdom and around the globe. But, for Isabella, the most important audience had already been reached. The children, families, and staff of St. Margaret's Children's Hospital would forever hold the honor of being the first to know about the newest member of the royal family. And, in years to come, when that child visited the hospital and heard the story of their announcement, they would understand that their life had been welcomed into the world with the purest kind of love and joy. The moment of truth had passed, and it had been perfect. Within minutes of Princess Isabella's announcement, the world began to change. The first ripples spread through the hospital itself, where staff members who hadn't attended the ceremony were quickly brought up to speed by their colleagues. Excited whispers filled every corridor as nurses, doctors, and support staff shared the incredible news that they had been among the first to hear. In the hospital's media relations office, communications director Amanda Chen found herself at the center of a growing storm. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since the announcement, with news outlets from around the world seeking comment, additional details, or exclusive access to follow-up stories. She had worked in hospital communications for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for the global attention that was now focused on St. Margaret's. "We need to handle this carefully," Amanda told her small team as they gathered for an emergency meeting. "This is wonderful news, but we have to remember our primary responsibility is to our patients and their families. We cannot allow the media attention to disrupt patient care or compromise anyone's privacy." Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the scene was becoming increasingly chaotic. News crews from every major network had arrived, their satellite trucks lining the streets surrounding the medical complex. Photographers with long telephoto lenses positioned themselves at every possible vantage point, hoping to capture additional images of the princess or any other members of the royal family who might arrive. The crowd of well-wishers had grown from the initial handful who had gathered for Isabella's visit to several hundred people, many of whom had driven considerable distances after hearing the news on their car radios or receiving alerts on their phones. Police had established barriers to manage the crowd and ensure that ambulance access to the hospital remained clear. 19-year-old Emma Thompson had been studying for her nursing exams at home when her mother called with the news. Within 30 minutes, she was standing outside the hospital with a handmade sign that read, "Welcome, baby royal," and tears of joy streaming down her face. "I've followed Princess Isabella since her engagement," Emma explained to a television reporter who had approached her for an interview. "She's always been so real, so genuine. The way she announced this today, surrounded by children and families who really needed some good news, it's just perfect. It shows what kind of mother she's going to be." Inside the hospital, the positive effects of Isabella's announcement were already becoming apparent. Children who had been listless or sad suddenly seemed more animated. Parents who had been stressed about their own family situations found themselves smiling and discussing names for the royal baby. The atmosphere throughout the pediatric wards had shifted from one of medical concern to one of celebration and hope. 12-year-old David Kim, who was scheduled for major surgery the following morning, had been anxious and withdrawn all week. But, after hearing about the princess's pregnancy, he began talking excitedly with his parents about whether the royal baby would be a boy or girl, what sports they might play, and whether they would attend the same schools as other royal children. It's given him something positive to focus on. His mother, Grace Kim, told the ward nurse. For the first time this week, he's thinking about the future instead of worrying about tomorrow's operation. Dr. Harrison observed similar reactions throughout the hospital. She had seen how celebrity visits could temporarily lift spirits, but this was different. The announcement of new life, combined with the authentic way Isabella had shared the news, seemed to tap into something deeper, a fundamental human response to hope and renewal that transcended individual circumstances. As news of the announcement spread beyond the hospital, reactions poured in from around the world. Social media platforms exploded with messages of congratulations, with hashtags like #RoyalBaby and #Princess Isabella trending globally within hours. The official royal family social media accounts saw their follower count surge as people sought official updates and behind-the-scenes content. In Singapore, Prince Alexander was in the middle of a climate summit panel discussion when an aide discreetly handed him a note with the news. His face immediately transformed with joy and pride, though he managed to maintain his composure until the session concluded. During the first break, he stepped outside the conference center to call Isabella. Their conversation filled with laughter, tears, and mutual excitement about sharing their news with the world. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there with you," Alexander told his wife, his voice thick with emotion despite the poor international connection. "But, from what I'm hearing, it was absolutely perfect. You chose exactly the right moment, and exactly the right people to share it with." "I couldn't wait any longer," Isabella replied, settled in the back seat of her car as it made its way back to the palace through streets lined with celebrating crowds. Being with those children today, seeing their strength and their hope, it just felt right to let them be part of our joy. Back at Rosewood Palace, the staff was working at a frantic pace to manage the situation. Sir Edmund Hartwell had called an emergency meeting with the communications team to draft an official statement that would confirm the pregnancy while managing expectations about privacy and future announcements. The palace's head of social media, Jessica Warren, found herself coordinating the most positive news cycle the royal family had experienced in years. Messages of congratulation were pouring in from world leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens. The palace's official statement, when it was finally released, was simple but warm. Their Royal Highnesses Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella are delighted to announce that they are expecting their first child. The baby is due in early summer. The princess's announcement today at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital reflects their desire to share this joyous news with the community that has meant so much to them both. Television networks immediately began preparing special coverage, with royal correspondents providing analysis and background on Isabella's journey from commoner to princess to expectant mother. News anchors shared stories about royal pregnancy traditions, discussed the line of succession, and speculated about how this child would be raised in the modern monarchy. The international reaction was overwhelmingly positive. The President of the United States issued a statement congratulating the royal couple, as did leaders from across Europe, Asia, and the Commonwealth. The announcement seemed to provide a moment of pure good news in a world often dominated by political tensions and global challenges. In the small town where Isabella had grown up, her former neighbors and classmates gathered at the local pub to celebrate. The establishment had been following her royal journey since her engagement 8 years earlier, with framed photographs documenting her transformation from local girl to beloved princess. Tonight, they raised glasses in her honor and shared memories of the down-to-earth young woman who had never forgotten her roots. "She always said she wanted to make a difference in the world," recalled her former teacher, Mrs. Patricia Hollow. "Becoming a mother will give her a whole new way to do that. This baby is going to be so lucky to have her as a mom." The economic impact of the announcement was immediate and significant. Tourism officials predicted a surge in visitors to royal sites and hospitals. Retailers began planning royal baby merchandise, from commemorative plates to children's clothing. The British pound strengthened against other currencies as investors responded positively to news that was expected to boost national morale and international interest in the monarchy. At St. Margaret's Hospital, the staff was already discussing how they might commemorate the historic announcement. Dr. Harrison suggested creating a special plaque for the atrium where Isabella had shared her news, while the children's librarian proposed starting a collection of books that the royal baby could enjoy during future hospital visits. Sophie's parents had been contacted by several media outlets hoping to interview the little girl who had drawn the prophetic picture, But they politely declined, wanting to protect their daughter's privacy while allowing her to enjoy the special role she had played in the day's events. They did agree to let the hospital share Sophie's drawings through their official social media channels, where they quickly became symbols of innocence and joy that perfectly captured the day's emotions. As the evening wore on, the immediate media frenzy began to settle into a more sustainable rhythm of coverage and analysis. But the fundamental change that had occurred that afternoon was irreversible. Princess Isabella had shared the most personal and precious news of her life in the most authentic way possible, and the world had responded with overwhelming love and support. The ripple effects would continue for months to come as the pregnancy progressed, and the public eagerly anticipated each development. But the foundation had been laid that afternoon in a hospital atrium, where a princess had chosen to be completely herself and had been embraced with the kind of love that reminded everyone why fairy tales, sometimes, do come true. The announcement had been more than just news about a pregnancy. It had been a moment of human connection that transcended royal protocol and touched hearts around the world. And, for Isabella, it marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life as she prepared to become not just a princess, but a mother. 3 months had passed since Princess Isabella's spontaneous announcement at St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, and the world had settled into a comfortable rhythm of gentle anticipation. The initial media frenzy had evolved into a warm, ongoing celebration of the approaching royal birth. Isabella's pregnancy had become a source of collective joy, with people from all walks of life sharing in the excitement of welcoming a new member to the royal family. The princess herself had blossomed during these months, both literally and figuratively. Now in her second trimester, she radiated the kind of healthy glow that expectant mothers often speak about. More importantly, she had found a new sense of purpose and authenticity that had transformed her approach to royal duties. The spontaneous honesty of that day at the hospital had liberated her from the constraints of overly formal protocol, allowing her natural warmth and compassion to shine through in every public appearance. Prince Alexander had returned from his diplomatic mission within days of the announcement, and the couple had appeared together at several events since then. Their obvious happiness and the tender way Alexander looked at his wife had endeared them even further to the public. Royal watchers noted that their body language had changed, becoming more openly affectionate and relaxed, as if the shared secret had been the only barrier to their complete comfort in the public eye. At St. Margaret's Hospital, the effects of that memorable afternoon continued to reverberate through every department. Dr. Harrison had indeed commissioned a small bronze plaque for the atrium, which read, "On this spot, Princess Isabella shared the joyous news of her pregnancy, reminding us all that the greatest announcements come from the heart." The plaque had become an unofficial pilgrimage site for expectant parents and well-wishers from around the world. The hospital had also experienced an unprecedented surge in donations and volunteer applications. Isabella's authentic connection to the institution had inspired others to get involved, resulting in funding for additional family support services and a new art therapy program for young patients. The children's library had been expanded, and a special Royal Baby Corner featured books about pregnancy, birth, and growing families. Sophie, the little girl whose drawing had predicted the pregnancy announcement, had become something of a celebrity herself, though her parents carefully protected her privacy. She had been invited to attend the hospital's Christmas party, where she presented Princess Isabella with a new drawing, this one showing the entire royal family with a baby carriage in a beautiful garden. The image had been shared widely on social media, becoming a symbol of innocent hope and artistic prophecy. The announcement had also sparked important conversations about pregnancy, motherhood, and the balance between public duty and private life. Isabella had become a champion for modernizing royal pregnancy traditions, choosing to continue her official duties while also being open about the challenges and joys of expecting her first child. During a recent visit to a prenatal clinic in an underserved part of the city, Isabella had spoken candidly about morning sickness, fatigue, and the emotional roller coaster of pregnancy. Her honesty had resonated with expectant mothers from all backgrounds, who appreciated having a public figure acknowledge that pregnancy wasn't always glamorous, even for a princess. Every woman's pregnancy journey is different, Isabella had told a group of mothers to be during that visit. What matters most is that we support each other, share our experiences, and celebrate the miracle of new life together. The international response to Isabella's pregnancy had exceeded all expectations. The couple had received gifts and well wishes from leaders around the world, from hand-knitted blankets made by grandmothers in rural villages to elaborate silver rattles from other royal families. The palace had established a special archive to preserve these tokens of global goodwill for the child to appreciate when they grew older. Perhaps most meaningfully, the announcement had inspired charitable giving related to children's health and maternal care. The Princess Isabella effect, as economists had dubbed it, had resulted in increased donations to children's hospitals, prenatal care programs, and maternal health initiatives around the world. Several countries had reported significant improvements in funding for pediatric facilities following the princess's heartfelt announcement. As spring arrived and Isabella entered her third trimester, excitement continued to build about the approaching birth. The palace had announced that the baby was due in early summer, and preparations were well underway at the prestigious London hospital where the birth would take place. However, in keeping with the more relaxed approach Isabella had taken to her pregnancy, many of the traditional royal birth protocols had been modified or eliminated entirely. At St. Margaret's Children's Hospital, plans were being finalized for a special celebration when the royal baby was born. The children who had been present for Isabella's announcement were planning to create a massive collaborative artwork welcoming the new prince or princess. Several of the young patients who had met Isabella during her pregnancy visits had expressed hopes of meeting the baby when he or she was old enough to visit the hospital. Marcus, the young leukemia patient who had helped create the congratulations banner, was now in remission and looking forward to starting school in the fall. He had told his parents that he planned to write a book about the day Princess Isabella announced her pregnancy, complete with illustrations of all the children who had been present for that historic moment. Dr. Harrison reflected often on that extraordinary afternoon when a routine royal visit had become a moment of pure human connection. She had seen many celebrities and dignitaries visit the hospital over her career, but none had ever had the lasting impact of Isabella's spontaneous announcement. The princess had turned what could have been a carefully orchestrated press event into a genuine celebration of life and hope. She reminded all of us why we do this work, Dr. Harrison told a group of medical students during a recent lecture. Healthcare isn't just about treating illness. It's about supporting life in all its forms. When Princess Isabella chose to share her news with our patients and families, she affirmed that hospitals can be places of joy as well as healing. As the due date approached, security preparations intensified around both the delivery hospital and St. Margaret's, where officials expected crowds to gather in solidarity with the place where the pregnancy was first announced. The palace had indicated that Isabella hoped to make a brief visit to St. Margaret's with the baby sometime after the birth, continuing the special connection that had begun with her spontaneous announcement. The media continued to follow every aspect of the pregnancy with respectful interest. Isabella's decision to be more open about her experience had created a new model for royal pregnancies, one that balanced public interest with personal authenticity. Royal correspondents noted that this approach had actually increased public affection for the royal family, as people appreciated the princess's honesty and relatability. International fashion designers had taken inspiration from Isabella's maternity style, which emphasized comfort and elegance over rigid formality. Her choices had influenced expectant mothers around the world, with many adopting her preference for flowing fabrics, comfortable shoes, and accessories that accommodated her changing figure. As Isabella prepared for motherhood, she also continued her royal duties with a renewed sense of purpose. Her work with children's charities had taken on deeper meaning now that she was expecting her own child. She had become a passionate advocate for improved maternal and pediatric healthcare, using her platform to highlight the needs of families facing medical challenges. The announcement at St. Margaret's had marked the beginning of a new chapter not just for Isabella and Alexander, but for the entire royal family. The spontaneous, heartfelt way the news had been shared had set a new standard for royal communication, emphasizing authenticity and human connection over rigid protocol. As summer approached and the birth drew near, the kingdom prepared to welcome its newest royal member with the same warmth and excitement that had characterized the response to Isabella's announcement. The child would be born into a world that had already embraced them with love, thanks to a moment of spontaneous honesty in a hospital atrium where hope and healing intersected with joy and new life. The story that had begun with a secret growing too wonderful to contain had become a testament to the power of authentic communication and genuine human emotion. Princess Isabella had shown that sometimes the most beautiful moments in life are the ones that can't be scripted, planned, or orchestrated. They simply emerge from the heart when the time is right and the setting is perfect. And in a few short weeks, when cries of a newborn baby would echo through the halls of a London hospital, that same spirit of spontaneous joy would mark the beginning of another beautiful story. The life of a child who would grow up knowing that their first introduction to the world had been met with nothing but love.